Well, welcome everyone. My name is Judy Wellman, and I'm the Executive Director, totally volunteer, of the 1816 Farmington Quaker Meeting House, which is about to be restored. We're replacing the roof this summer. If you want to take a drive by and see some action, it's in Farmington, New York, which is 20 miles east of Rochester. And this program today is co-sponsored with Genesee Country Village, which we're delighted to have and to be here, and also with Aquaba, the Heritage Associates, and Robin is a member of the Aquaba and also the Black Storytelling League in Rochester. She's also a member of the 1816 Farmington Quaker Meeting House Board, as is Carrie. And we are being videotaped by our videographer, Demian Spindler, who does a fabulous job. So if you miss any of this or want to see it again, it will be up on the 1816 Farmington Quaker Meeting House website. This program is also sponsored with the Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives out of Rochester. Some of you may know Ken Morris Jr. And I'd kind of like to dedicate it to Ruth and David Anderson, that some of you may know as founders of Aquaba. Their spirit hangs over a lot of what we do, and we miss them. We'll be thinking about them. This program today also fits into the Underground Railroad Consortium of New York State program. It's a program they're sponsoring called Freedom 2027 to commemorate the end of slavery in New York State in July 4th, 2027. A lot of people do not realize that New York State had people in slavery. And so we'd like to think about the way in which enslavement affected people, and then next year for Freedom 27, they're going to focus on abolitionism, and the following year on free people of color after New York State officially abolished slavery. Robin, I first knew you because I was working on a project to commemorate women's suffrage sites in New York State with Pomeroy markers. And Hester Jeffrey in the Memorial Land Design Church was really an important suffragist, a friend of Susan B. Anthony, nationally known. So we wanted to put up a Pomeroy marker sign, and then we got in touch with Robin, and we worked with the pastor, and there is now a Pomeroy marker for Hester Jeffrey in front of the church. So, and then Robin joined the 1816 Farmington Quaker Meeting House Board. And today, I'd like to introduce her in her other persona, Nancy Tolliver, who was one of the current Robin Nowell's ancestors and will be appearing today in first-person presentation about her life as an enslaved woman in New York State in the early 19th century. Nancy. For Miss Tolliver, or however you would like to be introduced.
Feeling like her. Good day, my people. I was asked to be here to give a talk because I am one of the people still living that came up here with Captain Helm from Prince William County, Virginia. And I can tell you stories about the journey up here, how we were treated in Prince William County, Virginia, and how we were treated in Bath, and a lot of different stories of events that happened along the way. Now, me and my husband, we were really from Maryland, the state of Maryland, and we were owned by the Tolliver family. But when their daughter, Matilda, married Captain William Helm of Prince William County, Virginia, we were sent there as their wedding gift. So we lived in Prince William County, Virginia for a while, and we made a lot of good friends. We had family there, and we did the work that slaves do. Cotton, tobacco, all of this kind of thing. But you know, the captain was something else. He was born into wealth. I don't think that man knows not a day's work in his life, but he can boss you around about it. And you know, that's the way it was with slaves who were slave owners that were born into wealth. and used to having servants around. They'll tell you what to do, but they don't know how to do it. And they don't have any timing. So they might say something like, build this house, and I want it finished by sundown. We can't do that. We can't do those kind of things. But that's the way that slave owners who were born into born into a slave-owning family did. Well, Captain Helm drank, gambled, he had a good time. He had fun all his life in ordering people. And he was mean, too. He would take a whip and whip you for the slightest little inclination. And his wife, whom we came with, Miss Matilda Tolliver Helm, she was just as mean. She had this big key, big heavy key, and she would hit you in the face. It would hurt you so bad, and people were afraid of her, and rightfully so. She was something else. They're never satisfied because they can get what they want, when they want, how they want it. They're never satisfied. So the two of them together was just too much. And they were not religious people, needless to say. They didn't bother about no church or anything at all. They just ordered people around and wanted this and wanted that. Want you to cook on the hottest day, bake bread, all this kind of stuff. Well, the reason why Captain Helm even came to Bath, and let me back up, he went to sodas first, is because he was such a gambler and he drank so much that he lost all of his property. He lost almost all his property except for his slaves. So he brought the slaves up here with him. Now, at first, we were in Sodas, farther west than we are now. We're in Sodas. And Sodas was this big, untouched property, wilderness. You didn't want to go out in the dark. You're thinking you're going to have snakes and alligators. And the mistress said, there are no alligators out here. But still, you had to worry. They had wolves, bears, mountain lions, everything. So you had to watch it. You couldn't be hanging. And then the last person to come up out of the field, and it's not a cotton field or anything, but of clearing, they would get whipped on the back by the overseer. And the overseer was just as ruthless. I don't know why those people were so mean, but they were just as ruthless. So we went to Sodas, and after a while, Captain Helm had enough of Sodas. He wanted to go to Bath. And you know what's in Bath that would attract a man like Captain Helm? Horse racing. Horse racing, a lot of gambling. So his character didn't change at all. He still drank a lot, he still bet a lot, and he was still losing money. I tell you, they started out rich, but it's not the way they ended. It's not the way they ended at all. He was losing money, and he would make it up, and he'd lose it, and he'd make it up, till finally he just lost everything. And ended up in a slave cabin with one of his slaves, taking care of him. Well, he got better at one point, a little better. And he tried to find a way to make money. And he was trying to figure out how he could get his wealth back. And he came up with this brilliant idea. He decided that he was going to invite all of his former slave servants to a party at his house to thank them for all their years of service. Well, Austin Stewart would tell you about that. He said he had an inkling that something was not right. So when he got all the people to the party at his house, he surrounded them with all of his men. And you know what he was going to do? Round them up and sell them down south. But they fought for their life because they knew what Southern slavery was about. Slave pens, cotton fields, the hot sun. They fought almost all night long. In the end, Captain Helm and his men only got about 4 or 5 little kids. That was it. But that's bad enough. You know, the ringing and the crying. It was bad when we left Prince William County, Virginia, leaving all the people we knew, crying and carrying on, and this was just as bad. They got away with about 4 or 5 little kids, actually belonging to one family. So, no. Well, as a slave, it was my job to do work in the house. A lot of us did work in the house. But there was a lot of times there was nothing to do, because the work that we were used to doing, you didn't do up here. So Captain Helm decided to rent us out to other people. And his slaves were all over the place. He especially made sure all the lawyers in Bath had a slave. He either let them have them or rented them out. So all the lawyers protected him as well, because he gave them slaves. Well, I tell you, you couldn't go nowhere. You were seen by everybody. You were doing all kinds of crazy work, depending on what he does. And it was just awful and brutal. Now, I tell you, Austin, whom we came up with, shared a story in his biography about his sister's beating. He don't know what his sister did. She worked for a lawyer, and whatever she did, he beat her all out in the street and everything. And this was on a Sunday. And then he goes to church and sits piously in the pews, like he's a real good Christian. But we know the real personalities and identities of these slaveholders. We know. And so Austin Stewart said he was helpless. What could he do? He said he just had to turn around and walk away, knowing what happened to his sister. So this is what life was like down in Bath, New York. Hundreds of us. Now, some ran away. Some of them ran away. My boy Humphrey ran away. He ran away, and we went to live with the Senecas up in Tonawanda. And there he worked for the rest of his life as the caregiver, the keeper of their burial grounds. And he was very protective of their burial grounds. No, you couldn't go over there, no. And he was also a caterer. And when Red Jacket had this big meeting, he catered the meeting for Red Jacket. Yes. Now, my other son, Nathaniel Tolliver, he got married, had this big fancy wedding, because by then, slavery was abolished, and they made money working the grist mill. For a minute, it was their grist mill. They somehow lost it. I don't know how they lost it, but they worked for the grist mill, and they got pretty wealthy. So when Nathaniel got married, there was this big wedding, great big wedding in the church and at this hotel, big fancy hotel. And the minister who married him talked about this wedding in one of his remembrances. Also, the wedding was in the paper, whole lot of stuff. They went to this big fancy hotel in Kennedyville, which is outside of Bath, one of the towns, and Canona is another town outside of Bath that people talk about. But he had a big fancy wedding in this big fancy hotel. And when the minister wrote about it, and I'm telling you, he told the truth. He said the only white people there were the servants and me. And this is 1848. Slavery wasn't even abolished in the whole United States yet, and you got white people serving us. So I always remember that. I always remember that part. So I had 3 sons, and they were Nathaniel, Humphrey, Fidelis. Humphrey ran away. Nathaniel got married, and later on moved to Allegheny County with his wife. And Fidelis, I don't know where Fidelis went. He was around for a long time, and then he just disappeared. We don't know. But you know, my family has been through slavery in the South and in the North, all over the place, and been hired out to this person and hired out to that person. And the way my son Humphrey escaped slavery, he was hired out to somebody to work on the boat, on the canal. He liked it. He stayed on the canal. When he was supposed to come back, he wouldn't come back. And they could never find him because he was protected by the Senecas. The rest of us, we carried on in our lives. And I got word where he was at, but I never saw him again. Never saw him, but the people would tell me, yeah, Humphrey, I saw him this way, I saw him that way. Now, he married an Irish girl whose parents died on the trip over here to America. And I got distracted, sorry. Her parents died, and he married her. And she used to wear a black veil whenever she was in public over her face, because so many people were staring at her, walking around the market with a black man. So she always was kind of hidden all the time and stayed in her place. But they had a nice house out in the country, and they had several kids who grew up and moved all over the place. But she stayed to herself. Now, there were other slaves and other slave owners in Bath. Not just Captain Helm. There was O.G. Adamson's, and there were other slave names. And I'm going to call out these names because you might know them. Watkins. There was Simon Watkins, whom, depending on who's telling the story, he was a real nice guy or he was a scoundrel, depending on who you talk to. Now, if you read Austin Stewart's book, he was a scoundrel. He was helping Captain Helm round up the slaves at this fake party to take them down south to sell them. And then he could get all his money back, so he thought. But he was one. But he was considered the mayor of Bath. And he was the one, he was like the dignitary representative. And he was at the wedding of Nathaniel Tolliver and Elizabeth Nichols. He was at their wedding, and he was the one that kind of made sure that the races didn't get too comfy. It was time to kiss the bride. He would always jump in. Oh, that's all right, you don't have to do that. Just so, things went smoothly, I guess. So he was something else. And the Watkins family, there was 3 of them, 3 brothers, but they were all part of, somehow, of the government. Now, Simon Watkins was a staunch Republican. He was so proud of the Republican Party that he gave his picture to one of the congressmen to take to the president. And he took the picture down to the president. And when he got back, Simon Watkins asked him, he said, well, what did the president say? And he said, boy, looks like a mighty fine slave to me. I would love to have him. He was ticked. He dropped being part of the Republican Party and went on to the Democrat Party. Now, let me explain. Back in the days, most African Americans who could vote were Republicans. Anybody know why? I tell you. Because of Abraham Lincoln. So blacks were Republican for a long, long time. But he was a Democrat way back, since the president told his friend he'd make a fine slave. Now, other things that happened down in Bath while we were slaves. There was a guy who was found guilty of murder, and those Watkins boys had to march him down to the prison, which was the Auburn prison. And you know, they got puffy, because they big shots now. You know, they gonna go down there and take care of business. So they were very popular people in Bath. The Watkins were slaves. Butlers were slaves. Lots of my people I know, lots of my people. They were slaves, and they had many slave families. And the slave family, I understand, is still around. They're still around, a lot of us. We haven't gone far from Bath, you know. Now, my son, he moved to Allegheny County to be with his wife, who was from Scioto, New York. And then they had family, and their family lived in Wellsville. Ouch, in Wellsville, New York. So we've been around a long time. They have been around a long time, a very long time. And I try to keep my family together as much as I can, keeping the stories and collecting the stories. And people are still doing that. Generations ahead of me. Generations ahead of me, they're still doing that. Still taking care of everybody. And that's all I have to say is Nancy Tolliver. Now, I'm going to come out of character a minute, and I'm going to show you evidence of everything I'm talking about. And we didn't want to take these up, so they're going to hold them up, and you guys can come around and look at it. Here is my actual family tree. That's Robin, and the Tollivers are in here, Nancy, William Tolliver, all these Tollivers. My great-grandmother, whom I knew, because she didn't die till I was a sophomore in college, her maiden name was Tolliver. Her name was Tolliver. So hold this. This is the family tree. And this is her father. We used to call her Grandma 20. Her name was Veda Woodland. But this is her father. His name is William Tolliver. And he's the grandson of the William Tolliver that came up from slavery with Captain Helm. And his wife, Nancy, me. Okay. And I like that picture because he's kind of good looking. All right, now, another thing here I have is the house of Humphrey Tolliver and his Irish wife. There was a big article in the Buffalo Courier newspaper. And I can't read the date on there, but there's some date on there. But this article was because they were going to tear his house down. They tore his house down. I'm thinking 1935, somewhere around there, but they tore his house down, and they told the whole story about how he ran away from slavery, how he met the Irish girl, how they were married, why she wore the black veil over her face, and other articles, other stories about them. So you guys can come up and look at all of these too in a few minutes. All righty. Now, the next thing I have is the death notice of Nancy Tolliver. I'll read it out loud for you, and then I will let everybody come around and take a look at it. Monday last evening in Bath, Nancy Tolliver, aged about 60 years. This is an obituary page. She was brought to this town as a slave 42 years ago from the Prince William County, Virginia, by John Fitzhugh, son-in-law of William Helm. She was the widow of William Tolliver and was much respected, always regarded as a favorite among the white families of the village. So that's that. Okay, and also slave owners in New York State had to register births of slaves. And years ago, we went down to Bath. We had a family genealogy club, and we go on trips and do all this research. And we went down to Bath, and we got some birth registry of Captain Helm. And one is Nancy's boy Humphrey, born November 11th, 1812. Property of William Helm, Bath, New York, May 1813. That's one of several other births. Then there's how'd you say it? Fidelis Tolliver, born to Nancy and Billy, and that was in August 1811. And this is somebody else, but this is how the birth notices used to look. You can go to the town hall in Bath, and you will still see these. You can still look them up. Oh, okay, come on over. All righty. All right. Hi. Okay. Everybody, that's Shirley's granddaughter. I forgot her name. Shania, yes. Sanaya. All right, now this is several generations later. This is we call them the Z sisters, but they are the children of William Tolliver, and we see Grandma Brown because she married a Brown a little while. But Grandma Brown, it was said that she liked dime store novels, and she named her daughter after dime store heroes. And so her daughters were Zoe, Zelda, Zeta, Zena. Then she ran out of Z's, and she had twin daughters, and they were Vera and Veda. Now my great-grandmother was Veda. And then they had one son, William. So there's still some Tollivers. They live in Syracuse, New York. So there's still some people named Tolliver in our family. But Veda, and I'll tell you a little more. Some of these people you might know. Jimmy Pappas, who's a professor he probably retired by now, at University of Buffalo. He's also an artist. This is his great-grandmother. Zeta, for those that are in my church, you know Vanessa Bliss. Zeta is her great-grandmother. Zelda, if you know Stanton Biddle, my cousin Stanton Biddle, that's his grandmother. And I didn't know Vera's kids, but Veda is our grandmother. If you know Wendy Tommy Boyd, their grandmother. If you know Jimmy Highsmith, the saxophonist, his grandmother. So that's how we can all stay together. And people say, you got a lot of cousins. But if you live in the same area for long periods of time, you're going to know first, second, third, fourth cousins, and so on. And then where did I say they were from? Oh, geez. William Tolliver's family lived in Syracuse. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And in Syracuse, we have his grandchildren. Barbara, we know. Pootie died a while back. But those are all, that's the line from these Tolliver slaves. This is the line. Okay.
Grandma Brown was a Peterson, too.
Right, she was a Peterson, and she was also, Grandma Brown, Wright. She was also a Wright. So she married a Tolliver, a Peterson, a Wright, and a Brown. Yeah, she had a lot of names. And this is the story about this wedding where all the white people served, and all the black people were guests in this fancy hotel. I get a kick out of that, so I have to always show that. Any questions? Any questions, anybody? Yes.
Booker Tolliver Washington, his middle name is pronounced the same but it's spelled differently. Can you hear me? Yeah. Is there any connection?
People ask that all the time, but our name was spelled like that too. T-A-I, Taliaferro. It's spelled like it would be pronounced Taliaferro. And he was from Virginia too, so I don't know. That's something we can't prove yet, but it sounds feasible. Anybody else have any questions? No? Okay. You know what? I'm very lucky because before I got started with this, family members, like in the 1930s, actually, where's she? It was Zelda, Alice. No, where's Zeta? She started genealogy way back when. And she wrote down names of family members, where they lived at, and she kept them in a Bible. So then when my cousin, Stanton Biddle, who's a retired librarian, started to work on it, he just had to take from her work. And then when I started, I just had to take from his work. So by the time I came along, most of it was all done. So I can't take a whole lot of credit for it. Most of it was all done. So, but we keep researching and we keep finding things. And if you know anything about genealogy, if you go from one side of the family, you get stuck or bored or whatever, you just go to the other side of the family and start working on that side.
And if you have people that remember the stories.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm very lucky that way. Shania. Huh?
We have another couple of minutes. Peter Wisbey has volunteered to talk a bit about the tour you all run and how they developed it. He's promised to make it short though, because it's so hot.
Thank you. Judy asked me to just explain some of the initiatives that we've done here at the Genesee Country Museum. My name is Peter Wisbey. I'm the Wareheim Curator of Collections. I'd like to introduce Matt Walsh in the back, our Director of Interpretive Programming. Ellis, some of you might have been on the Freedom and Fairness Tour with Ellis. We have spent some years developing our interpretive direction. The Nathaniel Rochester House has been part of our museum collection since 1987. And if you had come in the early 2000s, you would have found a very laudatory exhibit about Nathaniel Rochester that makes no mention of his enslavement practices. So about 2000, we began to think about that building differently. First was to remove that exhibit, period. And then in 2022, using some seed money from the Monroe County Regional Library, we employed a student from SUNY Oneonta to come and research. We knew that Nathaniel Rochester came to the Genesee country in 1809 with his family members from Hagerstown, Maryland, and 10 enslaved members of his family. The only 2 of those 10 that we could identify were a young woman named Cassandra and a young man named Benjamin, because he had manumitted them in 1810. But in a way, he had granted their freedom, but then also taking them back into his household, or taking back Cassandra into his household as an indentured servant rather than an enslaved person. The other 8, we wanted to try and find their names and what had become of them and what had become of Cassandra and Benjamin. And so we tasked this student from Oneonta with traveling around. She visited many town historians, offices, libraries, research facilities, the papers at the University of Rochester. And we couldn't really find much more information than had been uncovered before. And so it led us to then thinking about, well, we need to research enslavement in New York State and to broaden it. And there were many great regional studies done by Judy and surveys of sites in Ontario and Seneca counties, done by Marjorie in Wayne County, done by Preston Pearson and others in Ontario. Lots of a fantastic project in the Bath region to document William Helm's enslaved community and to find the names and faces behind Austin Stewart's accounts. So we began to pool all of this research together and apply to the National Endowment for the Humanities. develop both an exhibit, which is now up at the Nathaniel Rochester House, and also our walking tour. We had more plans, except that the National Endowment for Humanities has gotten quashed. And that initiative of $25,000 led us to apply for a $188,000 grant from the IMLS, the Institute for Museum and Library Services, which is, again, another federal agency that has been quashed as well. It's not to say that we are not committed to telling the story and to continuing our research, but it's just a little slower we will do it. It's just a little slower, be more patient with us. We are continuing to move forward.
How many people are our descendants? Are there any? Oh, is that so
this programs like this tell us how active and important it is to record these stories, to find these people, to make sure that the stories that are presented here are living stories and that communities are important to our interpretation. And we're so pleased to have you here. If you have a chance and you haven't been to the Nathaniel Rochester House, please go see our exhibit on enslavement in New York State. We will go down to the Quaker Meeting House to be in that space as well and answer any of your questions that you have here. And please network, talk, share stories. We love all of it, and we're so glad that you're here today. Thank you.